Welcome back to the channel, team. In this video, we're going to be going over how to weaponize storytelling to build a 7-figure personal brand so good, people beg to work with you. If that's not a title that makes you want to stick around for the video, I don't know what is. Let's get into it. The first quote is, "The universe is made of stories, not of atoms." And this was said by Muriel Rukeyser, and I did have to look up who this lady actually was. But she is like an American poet, essayist, biographer. She does a lot of writing, so she knows what she's talking about in this field. So let's see what she wrote. Book of the Dead. I've not personally read it, but anyway, that's besides the point. In this video, we're going to be going over an overview of why storytelling is so important within your creative business, within your personal brand, why it's one of the best levers you can pull to build a connection with your audience. We're going to go over why most people can't tell stories, and why it's actually costing you a lot, the truth about storytelling that nobody tells you, and then we're going to go through the actual formula which you can use to tell stories regardless of kind of how you're doing it, whether you're selling a webinar, whether you are writing a landing page, whether you're creating a short form script, a long form script, whether you're writing a novel. It doesn't matter. This is the same formula that everybody uses to write good stories, regardless of the situation. And I'm going to give you some homework so you can go ahead and actually action this in your own business. So let's get into the first section. So why most people can't tell stories and why it's costing you everything. So the fact of the matter is that you in your life have experiences. You have cool stories that you can tell, right? If you can think off the top of your head, there's probably something cool that's happened to you that you say at parties quite a lot. When you meet new people, you tell that story. It's quite funny, okay? It altered the trajectory of your life to some degree. The problem is that you cannot tell those stories for shit. Right? When you start telling it, you can see people's eyes glaze over, they kind of zone out, they're not really listening to what you have to say. And that's because you don't have the art of storytelling nailed, okay? You know those people who come in and they start telling a story and everyone's glued to them. They're listening word for word to what they have to say. They have everyone laughing, like the story has them on the edge of their seat. That's what we're trying to do here. That's what we're trying to master. That's a skill set. That's not something that just comes naturally, okay? The reality is, it's not because your story isn't entertaining. Like, I'm sure you have some sick stories that you could tell, but the fact is you've never learned to tell it in a way that keeps people on the edge of their seat, biting their nails and feeling emotions with you as you experience them and as you tell it, right? And if you can't do that, in a world of attention on social media where everyone's fighting for the same attention, same views, you're not going to stand out. So if you can learn this skill set, you're going to be able to capture attention. And if you can't do that, it's costing you clients, opportunities, influence, and impact. The power of stories, they are the oldest technology we have for sharing information, for sharing ideas, emotions, beliefs from one mind to another, okay? Before language as we know it, before people were writing things, before like stone tablets were around, stories were how we survived. They were how we learned and shared information. That power hasn't gone anywhere. It's just a lost art by most people. And the people who master storytelling don't just communicate better, they lead better, sell better, and inspire better. These are the people who are like at the top of movements. If you look at presidents, if you look at anyone who's had like a decent political campaign, if you look at any like dictators, if you look at any sort of people in positions of power, famous people on social media, celebrities, the reason that everyone listens to them, all the best authors, obviously. The reason that people listen to them is because they are able to keep people's attention, retain people's attention through the art of storytelling. That's how important it is. Okay, everyone talks about getting attention with things like hooks and visuals, but no one really talks about retaining attention with storytelling, and that's what we need to do. If you can't tell your story in a way that moves people, you will always struggle to build a brand, close deals, or have a real impact. Once you master this skill, doors will open, people will listen on a longer time period. And this is actually what's going to help people to understand what you're like, understand your struggles, understand your situation, and relate to you on that human level. Okay, so we're about to learn the exact formula I use to craft stories. What we're about to learn is the formula that's helped millions of people to create millions of dollars. I'm talking about the biggest authors, the biggest marketers in the world. Okay, build loyal audiences, create transformation. 10 steps that we're going to run through to take someone from completely indifferent to you and your brand to sold, to invested, to passionate about what you have to say. People think that storytelling is a talent, it's something that you're born with, a natural storyteller, a gifted storyteller. In reality, that's just not the case at all. Okay, it's a formula that you can memorize and apply to your life, to the things you say, to the things you write. Okay, it's a simple, repeatable system that anyone can master. And the greatest storytellers in history, from the ancient elders of the Hawaiian kupuna, I did some research, like the Hawaiian leaders from like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, to George R.R. Martin, the author of Game of Thrones, which I've just finished reading, which were very good, would recommend, to modern marketers like Russell Brunson and myself. Not putting us in the same category, but you never know. All follow the same patterns. They understand the mechanics of what makes a story work, and once you know what levers to pull to play on the human psyche, you can't unsee it. But something you need to understand is stories aren't just about conveying information. So we're not telling a story to like teach somebody a certain thing, right? They're about emotion and the way that we make people feel. People buy based on emotion. People take action based on emotion. They don't generally take action based on just pure logic. So you want to make people feel stuff. Okay, data just informs them of what's going on, but emotion makes them pull the trigger and take action. So if your content doesn't make people feel something, either curiosity into your ideas, fear about their current situation, creating that kind of urgency within them, hope for a potential future outcome, anger at the enemy in the space, like things that they should hate, inspiration, you're not really telling a story. It's more like just telling a report. You're just giving a report on what's going on. Okay, and reports don't move people. No one likes reports. And the best stories, before we get into the actual structure, something to bear in mind is that they create a mirror. So the more that a certain person can see themselves in a story that you're telling, the more they're going to relate to you, the more they're going to feel emotion towards that story, because they relate to it. They can see themselves in the story, they see themselves in the protagonist. That's when they're going to relate. That's when they're going to move deeper into your ecosystem and take your word as gospel a little bit more. And it's just the same as anything else, right? So storytelling, I like to think of it as like the foundation. So the same way that a piano player would learn scales before he goes and creates his own masterpiece, you need to learn the foundations for storytelling before you can go ahead and freestyle and make your own stories. Okay, if you can understand this, your stories are going to land with precision and power every single time. So let's dive into it. So the first step is the hook. Same with all content. If you're in marketing or anything, you will know that the hook is what grabs attention at first. Okay, you have 3 seconds, maybe less, to get the brain to think, this is worth my time, I'm going to stick around for a bit more. If they don't, they're going to swipe away and they're gone forever, and they're never going to get any deeper into your ecosystem. The hook is your only chance to stop the scroll, silence the room, or pull someone out of their distraction and into your world. The hook isn't a gentle introduction, it's disrupting. It's a pattern disruption. We all know this. This is hooks. This is like content 101. The hook is a pattern interrupt. It creates that intrigue. It creates that kind of unexpected shock factor that gets people to stick around. There are several types that you can use. I've added some examples here. A bold statement. I lost everything in 48 hours and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Creates intrigue. What? He lost everything. Why is that good? Why is that a good thing? I want to hear more. Okay. Question. What if everything you've ever been taught about success is backwards? Again, creates intrigue. What if everything's backwards? What if everything I've been taught is backwards, right? Shocking fact, 97% of people will die with their dreams still inside them. What? That's crazy. What? 97%. Okay. Vivid scene. I was standing on the edge of a bridge, hands shaking, wondering if this was it. You're like, what? What's going to happen? Okay. This is actually a really good one that you can use, and it pairs well with visuals as well. Contradiction. The day I stopped working hard was the day I started making real money. Again, your brain's like, what? You have to work hard to make money. What does he mean? And you stick around for the rest of the video. Okay. Key things you want to cover in these hooks, regardless of the type that you use, is emotion. Okay. Hooks that trigger emotion immediately. Curiosity is a big one. Opening a curiosity loop at the start gets people to watch till the end. Fear, intrigue, anger, hope. Emotion is the gateway to attention. If your opening line is flat, logical, or predictable, you've already lost. Okay. So if you open a hook by saying, let's think about this. The sky is blue. No one really cares. No one really cares that the sky is blue. So you have to create intrigue. If you said, the sky is blue, here's why, that kind of creates a bit more intrigue because you kind of want to know why the sky is blue. It's not, why is the sky blue? Anyway, I'm going off topic, but you see what I mean. You want to create intrigue. You want to create some sort of emotion with that opening line. You want specificity as well. So for example, if you said at the start of a video, I learned something this week. That's pretty boring. No one really cares. It's not really specific to anyone. But I lost 47K because I lost $47,000 in a single afternoon because I ignored one email. That's specific, that's strong, and that relates to certain people in the make money niche, in the email marketing niche. Like that makes a bit more sense, right? Specificity creates credibility and paints a picture in their minds so they can actually visualize what's going on and have a bit more clarity. So read your hook out loud. Does it make you want to know what happens next? Would you stop scrolling if you saw it? Okay, if the answer is no, rewrite it. The hook is the most important sentence of the entire story, so put your time into it. If people don't react to the hook, they're not going to watch any of the rest of the video. So make sure it's good. Once the hook lands, we're going to move to the next step. Okay, now we need to build a world and give a bit more context as to what's actually going on so that we can move the story forward. So step 2 is context, building the world, giving them more of an understanding of what's going on. So now that you've hooked their attention, you've got them in the short term, we now need to retain that attention. So they need to know where they are. They need to know what's going on. This is the foundation of your story. You're laying the foundations. You're letting them know what's going on. Where are we? What's the situation? As quickly and efficiently as possible. Okay. Without it, your story is kind of like it's not grounded. It's like you've got the hook, but you have no other context. So we need to make sure that the listener can see, feel, and inhabit the world you're describing. Okay. So context answers these essential questions. Who is this about? Like, who are we talking about? Where are we? When is this happening? What's the actual situation? It gives us, it allows us to build up a picture in our head of what's actually going on. Context should be efficient. Okay, so don't dump your entire life story. Just give the details that are actually important. So just give enough details to orient the listener without losing momentum. Think of it like setting a stage. You're painting a scene, not writing the whole novel. So a few vivid details are more powerful than just information. The best context makes the listener think, I've been here. Even if the specifics are different, the emotion should feel universal. Maybe they've lost a business. Maybe they felt failure. Maybe they haven't stood on a stage, but they felt fear. Find the common thread. So for example, some things that might work. You open with the hook and then you say, 3 years ago, I was working 80-hour weeks in a job I hated, barely seeing my kids, drowning in debt. That paints the picture, that paints the problem, where you're at, what you're doing really quickly. It was 2 a.m. in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn. I had $200 in my bank account and rent due in 3 days. Okay, again, problem, situation, where are we, what's going on? You know all these things within 2 sentences. I just finished my 3rd failed launch. My inbox was full of refund requests. My confidence was shattered. Boom, sets the tone, sets the situation. And something really important that you want to have here is sensory details. So make the context vivid. For example, cramped apartment, confidence was shattered. Okay, barely seeing my kids, drowning in debt. These are sensory things. If you said I was broke, that's like, okay, it doesn't make me feel anything. But if you're saying I was eating ramen for the 4th straight night in a row, staring at my bank account with $37 in it, that's sensory, that's visual, that's something you can picture in your head. Okay, and that's going to help you to get that emotion across. Now, context is setting the stage. Now we can get into the actual story, the situation, what's actually going on. This is the calm before the storm. We're laying the situation, setting it up for the actual story itself. So let's introduce the storm. Okay, every great story has a big problem, a challenge, an obstacle. Without conflict, there's no story, just a sequence of events. So conflict is what creates tension. It's what makes people lean in. It's the storm that tests the character and reveals who they really are. So these are the types of conflict that you can kind of use. An external conflict. So for example, lost my job, failed a marketing launch, got rejected, ran out of money. Okay, these are the conflicts. Internal conflicts, these are going to be psychological things. Self-doubt, I was scared to get in front of the camera. I was scared to go to the gym. I had this limiting belief about going to the gym. I had an identity crisis, so internal conflicts. And then relational conflicts, so tension with other people. Someone betrays you. So you have a difficult conversation to have, a broken partnership, your parents are disappointed in you, something like that. Okay, so this conflict should feel real and significant. If the problem's too small, no one's really going to hang around. If you say like, oh, I had to pick between like orange squash and blackcurrant squash at the supermarket, nobody really cares. Like, it's not really a big thing, right? But if you make it specific, if you make it big stakes, that's when people are going to care. Okay, so and again, you want to be specific. So don't say things were getting really hard at work. You say, I opened my laptop to find an email from my biggest client. We're terminating the contract effective immediately. Specific details to make it visceral, to make it tangible. Okay, turn the problem into real felt experiences. And again, we want to trigger emotion here. We want to make people think like, oh shit, he's in trouble here. He could be in real problem. We want to, because again, we want to create that intrigue to see how the story ends. At each stage of the story so far, we want to create intrigue to see how the story ends. We've got the hook. Like, oh, I want to hear more. We've built the world to give a bit of context, and now we're introducing the problem that people want to see resolved. Okay. Again, tap into those human experiences, and then we can move forward to the stakes. So we've come up with a problem. For example, I open my laptop to find my biggest client, say we're terminating the contract effective immediately. Why does that matter? What does that actually do? It's like, oh, okay, like we've got other clients, it doesn't really matter too much. We need to create stakes, like a reason for them to think this is bad, we need to fix this, okay? Stakes are what makes the conflict matter. So instead of the question like, so what, it doesn't really matter, we're making it become life or death. Like, this is a big problem that needs resolving. That's what's going to make people like want to watch to the end, because they want to see how the problem gets resolved. Stakes are what turn a problem into a crisis, that will make the audience emotionally invested in the outcome. Exactly. So clarity about what's at stake. So what happens if the character doesn't make a change? So if they lose their biggest client and they don't make a change, what happens? They lose their house? Do they lose their job, home, security? Do they lose their identity, their confidence, their girlfriend, their parents, their self-worth? Or existential stakes? They lose their purpose, their meaning, their legacy, who they become. Okay, we want to be clear what's at stake here. What happens if things stay the same? For example, if I didn't figure out how to get a new client, I'd lose my house and my family would lose everything. That's bad. This isn't just about the business, it's about proving to myself that I wasn't a failure. Again, that's like an internal emotional stakes. I realized if I didn't change, I'd wake up in 10 years with the same regrets, the same emptiness, the same life I was trying to escape. That hits hard. A lot of people have those feelings in their head as well, and that's an existential stake. Again, all of these create emotion within the viewer: fear, hope, desperation, determination. Raise the stakes and they care more about the story. This is what's going to keep them about. If you start saying like, oh, I'd lose like 5k a month by making like 70k a month, that doesn't, like, people are going to be like, oh, that doesn't really matter, I don't really care how this ends, and they're going to swipe. But if there's big things on the line, people are going to stick around to see how it's resolved. So now the audience are locked in. They want to see, they know what's at risk, they know the problem, they want to see how this shit gets resolved. They care about the outcome. So this is where the struggle comes in. So this is where we kind of take people through the actual battle of like making progress, right? We've got the problem, we've got the stakes. How are we going to move towards fixing this? Okay. This is where most storytellers fail. Okay. They skip from problem to solution without showing that messy middle, about the struggle. Okay. In any story, in any sort of relationship you have with somebody, you need to have those messy parts, those difficult parts, to really build up that relationship, build that kind of tension, build up some sort of reciprocity with each other, right? The struggle is where the story lives. It's where the character is revealed. It's where the audience see themselves. And if you skip the struggle, you rob the story of its guts, like its true power. So the struggle must feel real, okay? Not glossed over, not sanitized. I see a lot of people create content and they're like, I grinded every day. It was really difficult, but then I made 20k a month. It's like, okay, but that struggle bit in the middle is a bit shit. It's like, I was working at my 9 to 5, didn't really like it, quit, worked really hard, and now I'm rich. That's like such a rubbish like arc. You see what I mean? So make it like real, make it like gritty. The failures, the moments of doubt, the times you wanted to quit. This is what makes you human, and this is what makes a story relatable to everybody else. So like, for example, I've got some examples down here. I spent 3 months building a course and nobody bought it. I launched to nobody bought it. I spent months building this thing. I questioned everything. I applied to 47 companies, got 46 rejections, believed I wasn't good enough. I woke up every morning with a knot in my stomach. I'd sit at my desk, stare at the screen, and feel paralyzed by fear. These are all, again, tangible, emotional things that people can relate to, okay? We're showing the battle, we're showing the hard times before we get to the good times. If you go straight to the good times, that doesn't build any real relationship with people, okay? Because a lot of people have experienced the bad times, and that vulnerability is what makes people care. So what kept you up at night? What mistakes did you make? Specific details make the struggle tangible, and they turn abstract difficulty into lived experience. Emotional, don't rush the struggle, okay? Let it breathe. So again, like I said, a lot of people just kind of glaze over the difficult part, right? They go, I quit my job, lost my job because I wasn't earning enough. I started doing X business model, and I failed a couple times, and then I made loads of money. You want to let it breathe. You really want to stay in that rock bottom area for as long as you can. Create that feeling. The longer you stay in the difficulty, the more powerful the resolution will be. The struggle is what makes that shift, that final thing, feel earned as opposed to just like manufactured. Okay. Otherwise, the transformation feels cheap. So a lot of people are they want to seem like they have everything figured out in their personal brand. So they skip over all the difficult parts, all the vulnerable parts. In order to make people really care about what you have to say and see that you have earned the position that you're in today, you need to dive deep into the pain, dive deep into the struggles you had before you got to the position you're in today. If you go straight from, I was in a tricky spot, I lost my job, to I tried a couple of things and now I'm rich, now I have $50,000 a month. There's no relatability to that whatsoever. Okay, people might relate to the starting point a little bit, but there's no struggle, there's no pain for them to latch onto and be like, oh my gosh, that's where I am, I'm in this position now. Then you just go straight to the dream outcome. So let the pain breathe. The longer you stay in the trenches in your story, the longer, the more opportunity you give people to relate to you. And when you get to that end, and when you get to that dream destination, it feels earned and people care and see you more as that aspirational figure. Cool. And in the dark moments, right, you can plant seeds of hope. So for example, if let's say you lost your job and you're trying to start a marketing business and you do a launch and it fails and you lose $10,000, but you learn something, you learn a little lesson, you can seed in these little lessons that you're learning. For example, it might be I was 300 pounds overweight, I was going to the gym every day, felt like I was wasting my time. I kept slipping up, eating, horrible foods, and I just used to sit in the gym, depressed, crying every single day, right? In that process, you might figure out the way you're training isn't good, the way you're dieting isn't good. You might pick up little lessons that you can then kind of seed in and foreshadow the things that help you in the end, okay? So the struggle can't last forever. At the end, something has to shift, a realization, a decision, an external event that actually kind of moves you towards the positive, okay? And that comes in the form of a turning point. So when you're in the trenches, when you're struggling, there will have been a point where you realized, oh my gosh, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to change to make the change, right? This is the most critical part of your story. It's where everything pivots. It's where the character moves from victim to victor, stuck to unstuck, hopeless to hopeful. Okay, and they can come in a few different forms. A realization. I suddenly understood what the problem was. A decision. I decided right then and there that I was going to X. An event. I got a call that changed everything. Conversation. My mentor told me something that hit me like a freight train. Okay, what was the changing thing? What was the point in your journey that made you realize, shit, that's what I need to do to win? Okay, be clear with this. Don't just say, for example, I realized that I was doing it wrong and now I'm rich. Okay, make it specific, the specific event that made it happen, how you felt at the time. Okay, so for example, I was sitting in my car crying when I realized nobody was coming to save me. I had to save myself. I'd probably go a little bit more specific than that, to be honest. That's kind of a generic one. I read one sentence in a book that rewired my entire brain. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your systems. That's actually a good one. This is actually one that I personally have, which is quite cool. And I looked at my daughter and thought I refused to let her grow up watching me quit. Okay, powerful emotional statements. And these things are often internal, okay, not a change in circumstances, but a change in perspective. So a new way of seeing the problem, a new way of approaching the things you've been doing, noticing you've been doing it wrong and changing the way you're kind of attacking it. So once we have this turning point, once we have this realization, then we can move to the solution. So the path to victory. So what do you realize? And then how does that change your approach to the problem? Okay, so now that that shift has happened, it's time to show what you do differently. The solution is the practical application of insight. So this thing that you've discovered, this things that you've kind of changed your perception. How does that change your approach? Okay, don't be vague here. So don't just say I changed my mindset. That's not really a solution. You can say, I started waking up at 5 a.m., journaling for 20 minutes, planning my day before I touch my phone. That's a solution to a specific problem, right? If possible, present the solution as a framework or a system. Okay, people love frameworks because they're repeatable. This is something I'll go over in a separate video, probably my offer video. I'll actually add a card on the screen because I go over this a little bit. But the more you can package your ideas into a unique framework or system, the more people are drawn to it. Okay, the more that people are going to be intrigued in it. If you just say, here's how to create good YouTube content, that doesn't really do anything for people. But if you say, here's how I did X amount of views with this specific packaging system, people are like, oh, it's a system. It's copy and paste. It's something that I can use. It's reliable. It's predictable. That's when they go for it, right? So if you can package this solution, this path into a framework, that's what's going to help people like to really kind of visualize it and get behind it. So for example, I stopped trying to do everything and focused on one thing, building an email list. Every day, one piece of content designed to grow that list. Specific, revealing the path. I hired a coach, built a morning routine, and committed to showing up even when I didn't feel like it. I realized I was selling to the wrong people. I niched down, rewrote my offer, and started speaking directly to my ideal client. Okay. Even the solution phase isn't perfect though. So once you've got this figured out, you've had this moment of realization, not everything's going to be smooth sailing. You want to chuck some obstacles in there as well. So you want to say, even though, I hired a coach, built a morning routine, I still failed to get up. It took me some time to actually get up at the right time. It's never going to be like a switch and you get it perfect. You want to include that as well. Okay, you want to have those doubts, but now you have direction. Okay, and this keeps the story grounded and realistic, and it makes it realistic, right? I think a big problem that people have is when they write these stories, they want to seem like the man. They want to seem like someone who's got it all figured out. I've said this before, but the more you can kind of be relatable, be human, and show the actual struggles you had, the better. Okay, and once we've kind of got this path figured out, we're moving towards that end goal, that final solution. Paint the after, okay? So what happened after you figured it out? Once you had the moment of realization, once you put those things in action, you implemented the roadmap, what happened? This is the after, okay? The audience needs to see the contrast between where you started and where you ended up. The bigger the gap, the more powerful the story. And this is where you show them what's possible. So this can be an external transformation. What changed in your circumstances with it? Money, clients, lifestyle, freedom. I've got an itchy nose. Apologies, guys. Internal transformation. You changed. You became more confident, more outgoing, more disciplined, more clear, more powerful. How did your relationships change? Deeper connections, better boundaries, stronger partnerships. Be specific, okay? So, for example, don't just say, my life got so much better when I implemented this. Say, I went from 3K a month to 30K a month in 6 months. I bought back my time. I started traveling with my family. I felt alive again. Be specific as to what it is that you get out of it, okay? For example, a year later, I built a 6-figure business, hired a team, and was working 20 hours a week instead of 80. I went from waking up with dread to waking up with purpose. I felt like myself again for the first time in years. I rebuilt my confidence. I started taking risks. I became the person I always knew I could be. Again, creating that emotion, help people to feel what you felt when you got to that point. So is it pride, joy, relief? And integrate these emotions into that after stage, okay? We're creating that aspirational identity here. And then finally, the lesson. So we've created this story where you've gone from big problem, okay, reason to care, setting the stakes, okay, the struggle, showing the issues you faced and why it was so difficult to fix, the turning point, the solution, and the after stage. We now want to extract the lesson. So what did we learn during this process? What is the one takeaway thing that we can take away? Okay, this is where you move from here's what happened to me to here's what it means for you. Okay, because in reality, people don't watch content because they want to pat you on the back and say, wow, well done, mate, that was really good. They want to watch content because they want to get something out of it. They want to have something to take home. And if you can have a good payoff, this is what's going to make people follow you. This is what's going to make people actually come back to watch more because you've given them something for free. Okay, so the lesson should be clear and concise, one core big insight. Don't dilute it with multiple lessons. So, for example, I learned that you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to take the next step. You can't outwork a bad strategy. Clarity beats effort every time. I realized that the only person holding me back was me, and I stopped waiting for permission. Everything changed. Okay. Tap into these universal truths, things that are going to actually benefit your viewer, benefit your audience. It's going to be the best way to do it. Yeah, again, creating those emotions within them. And once we've done that, we've got a pretty comprehensive story overall. We started in a place of pain. We've created that actual, the issues, the stakes. We've gone through the struggle. We've had a turning point. We've implemented what we've learned. We've come away with a specific outcome and a lesson. Okay. Now we just want to move them to action, right? So off the back of the lesson that we've just learned, we want to have a specific call to action. So every story should move someone to do something, to think differently, to feel differently, to act differently. And this is where you call them to make that specific. Okay. So the types that you can use. So at the end, it can be a specific call to action Stop waiting for the perfect moment, start now. We're kind of summarizing the lesson we've learned, okay? We're telling them to move them to action directly what to do. So write down one thing that you've been avoiding and do it today. If you're ready to build this for yourself, here's how I can help. I challenge you to commit 90 days of restless execution, no excuses. Be clear as to what it is, what the takeaway from the video is, and what the sort of action step is. All right, a lot of people will kind of get confused. You want to just give them something specific to action on. All right, cool. Create some urgency. Okay, the story should have done that by having that kind of emotional arc. It's going to inspire them to actually take sort of action straight away. Cool. And sometimes the call is simply giving them permission to want more, permission to take the leap. Permission can be the most powerful call of all. Cool. End strong. We want to end with a strong statement. A lot of stories kind of get to the resolution, they kind of fizzle out and they miss off the lesson and that kind of call to action. This is how we end the story strong. All right. So overview, we've now got that hook to grab them by the throat, context to kind of get them to understand what's actually going on, introduce the conflict, set the stakes, go through the struggle, show the battle, shift the turning point, the solution that you realize from the turning point, the path that you take, and then the transformation, the after state that comes as a result of that solution. And then the lesson you've learned, and then telling them exactly what to do with that lesson. All right. Homework. Take one story from your life, a struggle, a breakthrough, or a lesson you've learned in your journey. I know you can think of one right now, like a big thing that's changed the trajectory of your life, and use this 10-step formula to write it out. Okay. Don't skip steps. Don't rush. Follow the structure exactly, and then read it aloud. If it makes you feel something, that's great. If it doesn't, rewrite it. Okay. And for the next week, every story you encounter, whether that's a movie, a social media post which really hits home with you, a podcast, identify the 10 steps within it. Okay. I guarantee you'll find it in everything that you do, every book you read. Okay. This is the formula that people use to create stories, to create that emotional resonance with their audience. The more you study, the more you'll internalize that pattern and be able to just create content off the dome. Stop hoarding your stories. Share one this week, post it, tell it, use it in a sales call, use it in your content. The only way to get better at stories is by telling stories. So start now, start today. The story could be the one that changed someone's life. So stories, and a final quote to kind of get us finished off is, stories are the secret reservoir of values. Change the stories individuals and nations live by and tell themselves, and you change the individuals and nations. Okay. Ben Okri. I'm sure you can kind of figure out what that means, the power of stories. Okay. This document is going to be below this video. You can go ahead and check that out completely for free. And I'm really liking these formats. I'm liking the ability to just kind of waffle and go off the dome. Let me know if you like these videos. Let me know if you got this far in the video, if you like this format of videos, and I will see you next week.